This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am super duper grateful. Yes, I have the answers to your questions about what happened with Judge Benitez and how it's going to affect the magazine ban in California. We're also going to talk about the bills that were signed today by Governor Newsom, AB 28 and SB 2. Sam will get into that. So this is a longer than normal interview because those happened actually live while we were talking about Judge Benitez's decision. So we'll get that information to you as well. This is, since it's a little bit longer, one of the things you can do to get through it a little quicker is you can actually set the playback speed and maybe set it, I think, on most platforms anyway, you can set it to like 1.25 or something. That'll speed it up enough that it'll get you through the interview a little quicker. Please do like and subscribe to my channel. I really would appreciate it. Helps me get the channel growing. YouTube sort of shadow bans me a lot. So whatever platform you're on, whether it's Rumble or Twitter or BitChute or Odyssey or whatever that you're, or YouTube for that matter, that you're on watching this, please do like the video and subscribe. It is tremendous help to me, and I really do appreciate it. Also, check out the Gun Guy TV Firearms Podcast. I'll be posting podcasts regularly again on YouTube, where I didn't do that before. I'd been keeping them just on Rumble and on your favorite podcast player, but you'll be able to see them on YouTube as well as Twitter. All right, let's go talk to Sam. Sam, thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. This is the day that I get to my listeners and viewers actually get to find out what's really going to happen with the mag ban thing. You know, as I was mentioning before we got on the show, I took my truck to the shop the other day, and one of the guys at the shop said, "So, is it going to hold?" And I'm like, "What, the truck?" He said, "No, the decision with the whole mag thing." And so this is the question I'm getting everywhere. So the questions I'm getting, I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute, and you can lay it out for us. A lot of folks are concerned this is going to just keep doing this seesaw thing where it keeps going up to the Supreme Court and being thrown back down here and up to the Supreme Court, and we're never, ever, ever going to actually get a final victory on some of this stuff. So that's one thing. The other thing is just a question of, what happens now? I mean, what's the status now? Can I go buy mags now? Do I have to wait? That kind of stuff. So if you can fill us in on that, that would be super duper helpful.
Well, first of all, let's start off this chat that we are having by encouraging everybody to go out and buy all the champagne they want and start icing it down, because the time is coming soon when we're going to be able to uncork them and celebrate for good. So the history of the large capacity magazine ban in California started out quite a few years ago. California Rifle and Pistol Association filed a lawsuit against it. Gun Owners California participated with amicus briefs to support that lawsuit. Judge Benitez was the judge on this case. He ruled in our favor with before the Bruin decision came down, and he used his own version of text, history, and tradition based on the Heller decision. So he said, yeah, it's completely unconstitutional. So, of course, the state of California appealed it to the Ninth Circuit. A three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit said, Judge Benitez is right. Of course, this is unconstitutional and must be overturned. So the state of California wet its pants and asked for an en banc hearing, which is 11 judges instead of a three-judge panel of the Ninth. I believe that the Chief Justice made sure that that panel was filled with a sufficient number of opponents to the Second Amendment that they would overturn the ruling from the three-judge panel and Judge Benitez. So our side, we appealed it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court kept it in its docket for a long time. They wouldn't accept it. They kept passing over it in conference and passing over it and passing over it. Then we got the Bruin decision. The Bruin decision laid out the test. The body of law that governs the right to keep and bear arms is Heller. And then McDonald said that this body of law applies to not only the federal government, but state and local governments. Then we had another case called Caetano that came in and said that all firearms or tools that citizens use for lawful purposes in a common way are protected by the second. So then Bruin came down, and what they did in Bruin, the Supreme Court gave us the test, because a lot of courts were flipping the middle finger to the Supreme Court and came up with balancing tests, and we're going to balance the infringement on an individual constitutional right against the needs of the government. And so they came up with these tests, and the Supreme Court said, no, 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 no. 2 steps is 1 step too many. If it infringes on the Second Amendment, then the government is required, the burden of proof goes on to government to prove that there was an analogous law to the law that's being considered here back at 1791. If it didn't, it is unconstitutional. If they can find an analog, then this issue can be considered and the court case can go on. As you and I know, there are no laws that govern magazines. There are no laws that govern most of the issues that are before the courts right now, whether it's so-called assault weapons or handgun bans or ammunition laws or magazine capacity cases, 10-day waiting periods, on and on and on and on. So after Bruin, the Supreme Court immediately granted certiorari to the Duncan v. Bonta case, the magazine case, wiped out the negative ruling from the Ninth Circuit, the en banc panel, and sent it back to them and said, now that you've got the test, do this over and do it right. So when the Ninth received the reprimand from the Supreme Court, telling them that they completely got it wrong, they could have changed their ruling and agreed with the Supreme Court and invalidated California's large capacity magazine ban. But what they tried to do is to extend this as long as they possibly could. I don't know if they're waiting for conservative Supreme Court justices to die or what, but they tried to extend it. So they sent it all the way back to Judge Benitez. Now, Judge Benitez, now he has Heller. So he comes up with this 70-plus page ruling where he eviscerates the arguments of the anti-gun left to the molecular level. He took every one of their arguments and just dissected them and left them on the petri dish to die. And he came up with this amazing ruling that said, yes, large capacity magazines under the Second Amendment are considered arms because semi-automatic firearms cannot function without magazines. And as a matter of fact, he points out, state of California, you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. First of all, you passed this safe handgun law that says that all semi-automatics have to have loaded chamber indicators and magazine disconnects, which will render the firearms inoperable if the magazine isn't in the gun. So a semi-automatic approved by California is not a functional gun unless it has a magazine. So Judge Benitez said, yeah, well, that means that magazines are considered firearms and protected under the Second Amendment. So he issued this wonderful ruling. We all celebrated. We've read the ruling. We're super happy with what Judge Benitez did. And immediately, the state of California appealed it to the Ninth Circuit. Judge Benitez, knowing that the state was going to appeal it, did not grant us another Freedom Week. He said, I'm going to give the state 10 days to appeal. I know you're going to appeal. So in order to keep things moving smoothly and quickly, I'm going to stay my ruling for 10 days. So California appealed it. We have not heard a response from the Ninth yet. 2 things can happen. Number one, the Ninth Circuit can accept the appeal, send it to a 3-judge panel, and we do that process all over again. Or the Ninth Circuit can reject the appeal, and Judge Benitez's ruling applies right away and is the law of the land, and magazines that hold more than 10 rounds will fall out of the sky, and we will be able to pick them up on street corners or wherever we want to get them. And we will be free again to use whatever size magazine we want for any of the firearms that we own. Now, if they do accept
I have
it,
a couple of questions here, and I suppose
Yes,
you're
sir.
probably going to address them anyway. But if the Ninth Circuit decides not to accept the appeal and Judge Benitez's ruling stands, does that ruling then only apply to the state of California, or does it apply to the entire circuit, or does it apply to the entire country?
My understanding, and now I didn't go to law school on purpose.
Yeah, I didn't either, and and I don't play a lawyer on TV or on GunGuyTV either, so yeah, I get it.
My understanding is that because the Ninth Circuit has actually dealt with the issue and rejected the appeal, is that sets precedent for the Ninth Circuit. So all of the states, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, California, all of the multiple states, we are the largest circuit. This will be the law of the land for these areas. So the magazine ban in Washington will be in jeopardy. The magazine ban in Oregon will be in jeopardy. And it'll basically short circuit all of the federal lawsuits that are taking place in all of these states that have come up with a magazine ban scheme. So it's far reaching. And if it applies to the Ninth, there will be appellate courts throughout the country that are going to say, hey, look at what they did in the Ninth. Maybe that also applies here. Let's take a look at this ruling. Wow, this is very well done and very detailed and well thought out and well argued. And maybe that's the law of the land for our circuit as well. There will be some circuits that will disagree, in which case it might have to go back to the Supreme Court. But if it does, I think that it'll be acted on expeditiously. The Supreme Court has proven to us that there are methods for them to be able to impact laws that come to them or cases that come to them without having to go to a full trial and wait the whole year to get a decision and all of that stuff. So there are a lot of different things that can happen. We don't know what they are, but in every case, we win.
So this brings up a couple of questions that I get all the time. One, what do you think are the odds if you were to, run off to Las Vegas and be an odds maker? Which I know you're not one of those either. But if you were to lay odds on it, what do you think the odds are that the Ninth accepts the appeal and sends it to a 3-judge panel or rejects the appeal? Where do you think we'll land?
I think the odds are really about 50-50. It all depends on whether the Ninth Circuit Chief Justice and the court accept the fact that they're going to get spanked again. The fact that we got a ruling out of Hawaii on sensitive places by an Obama-appointed judge that used the Heller test to invalidate the laws on the books there.
You mean the Bruin test, right? Just
the Bruin test,
because you said Heller. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm tracking with you. That's all.
Yeah. So Heller set the law. Bruin sets the test.
Right.
It just clarified and amplified how courts, inferior courts, lower courts should be considering cases having to do with the Second Amendment. They're put on notice. The Supreme Court already told the Ninth, you got it wrong. We're wiping out your decision. Do it again. Now use the right test. If they use the correct test, there's no other way that this case can come out except a victory for the right.
Well, and I would agree, having read the decision, because, and then I've got other questions, obviously, but
please,
one of the things that Benitez did in this, I love that guy. I'm so sad he's going to retire at some point or other, but I love that guy. He went to the trouble to refute so many things in that decision. And one of the things he did, which Chuck Michel has mentioned a number of times, is he addressed this attempt by the state to bring up analogs that have absolutely nothing to do with firearms, the Bowie knife laws and the Billy Club laws and the weirdo analogs over here, and the gunpowder storage laws, which were nothing more than fire regulations, had nothing to do with guns, and they bring these things up, and he addressed that and went back to the Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court says they have to find analogous firearms regulation. And then he also addressed the time frame because they keep wanting to go, way before into the 1600s, and they want to go into the 1900s and talk about analogs. But it really came down to what I think all of us have thought it came down to, which is 1791, when the Second Amendment was incorporated into the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights became a Bill of Rights. And 1868, when the 14th Amendment was passed and incorporated into the Constitution. And if they can't find anything in there, they're not going to find anything. And even Judge Benitez pointed out that there's not very much there to find. And then I think he also addressed the fact that the territorial laws really don't mean anything because they weren't state laws, they were territorial laws, and territories had a whole different sort of weird free hand to do whatever they wanted to that it really didn't address. It wasn't constitutional a lot of the time, and because they were territories, they were considered temporary regulations. So he went through and really addressed all of this crap. I'm of the opinion, having read that it's going to be, it just seems to me that unless the Ninth Circuit or these other circuit courts do some incredible legal gymnastics to tie themselves into a knot, I don't see how they find the majority of firearms regulations that exist today constitutional. It seems to me the majority of them are unconstitutional, have been for a long time, and under this test. What are your thoughts?
I would argue even more. All of the gun control laws that are on the books today in California are unconstitutional, not just the majority. Basically the Supreme Court and Judge Benitez pointed out that outliers don't count. So you can't pick something that happened in the Oklahoma Territory before it became a state in some little place. You're absolutely correct. Heller did the historical research on what the laws were at the time of the founding. The Second Amendment has to be interpreted with the meaning that they had at the founding, at the signing of the Bill of Rights in 1791, not the 1906 or 1903 Sullivan Act of New York gun control laws, not the laws that were promoted by the Democrats after the Civil War to prevent
I know what you're going to say, and I got to agree. When I'm reading his decision, I'm going, they are desperate. They are desperate because they're using Bowie knife laws as analogs, which don't apply. And they're desperate when they're pulling out laws that were there to ban the firearms ownership of minorities, when they wanted to strip freed slaves of firearms ownership, when they wanted to strip Native Americans of firearms ownership. These are incredibly bigoted, racist laws. And when the state of California is pulling those out to use those as analogs and thinking that's positive,
yeah,
that's just stunning to me. And Judge Benitez tossed them. He said not only do they not apply, he wouldn't even entertain using them as an example by virtue of the fact that they have such horrible racist roots. And yet those are the ones that California wanted to hang its hat on. And I thought to myself when I read that, if California, if that's the hill you want to die on, that's not a good plan to me. So anyway, you got me off on that. I apologize, but I'm like, good night.
Perfect, no, that's absolutely perfect. And that kind of thinking also goes to the issue of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who the government, all governments consider them adults.
Right.
And we are treating them the way we treat the newly freed slaves or the Native Americans, saying that they don't have the full panoply of rights that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. That is plainly and flatly wrong, racist. It is unconstitutional.
You can't take a whole swath of American adults and say they don't have a specific set of rights every other adult has.
Yeah. Only some adults have all the rights and some don't. So they're stuck. And the reason that I realize or observe that as you pointed out, the anti-gun left like Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta are in great fear that they're about to lose all of the gun control laws, is that Gavin Newsom's response was, number one, to vilify Judge Benitez, he obviously didn't read the decision. He doesn't read the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. He has not read what the Supreme Court has ruled on these issues based on the law, not on emotion. And Gavin Newsom comes up and says, "This is why we need the 28th Amendment in order to allow for these laws to be written and passed by states throughout the country." That is saying, yeah, I know we're wrong on all of these, and we actually need a constitutional amendment to be right. And that is a sign of desperation and an acknowledgement on their part that they know that they are wrong. And that's plain, flat, simple. I don't know how to make it any more clear than to state that the anti-gun left knows that they are going to be a part of the ash bin of legal history with regards to their attacks on the Second Amendment. Gun control is going to change in a massive way in a very short period of time. We're already seeing what's happening across the country, and especially here in California. You know, Joel, I always joke that California either affects or infects the rest of the country. And we've been doing a whole lot of infecting lately, but we are being, the country is being immunized by the courts.
Yeah, we're going to disinfect it now.
That's correct.
We're going to disinfect it now. Which brings up a couple more questions, just points of clarity. There is this concern that this is just going to go up to the Supreme Court and be brought back down again, and up to the Supreme Court and brought back down again. And I did ask Chuck about this, and he explained that no, that will not happen, because the only and obviously he knows what he's talking about. I don't, and so correct me if I've misunderstood him, but that won't happen because what the Supreme Court did with Bruen, once they settled the test, and I love the way you illustrated that, because that was the last piece that we really needed, except maybe some clarification on it in the future. But when they set the test, then since they changed the rules of the game, these are the rules under which you lower courts have to function now, rather than making up your own. This is what you have to do. They sent it down to have it decided that way. If it gets to the Supreme Court again, since the Supreme Court's not going to change the rules again, then it would not come back down again. It would just get there, and so basically wherever this case stops is where it stops. And if it gets to the Supreme Court, it's a one and done. It's not going to go back and forth again. Do I have that correct?
In essence, you are correct. They are down to their last and final options. And in order for it to go back to the Supreme Court, the Ninth Circuit is going to have to completely ignore what the Supreme Court said in Heller, McDonald, Caetano, and Bruen. They're going to have to completely come up, as you said, with some legal gymnastics to try to justify their support for gun control in California and to deem these gun control laws as constitutional. It's to the point. If it goes back to the Supreme Court, boy, the smackdown that they're going to get is going to be epic. And if the Supreme Court wipes out another negative ruling from the Ninth, I think it'll go back down to the Benitez decision, and that will be the law of the land. And at least for the Ninth, as it progresses throughout the rest of the country. So yeah, they're coming to a dead end. This is it, I think, and they either accept the fact that they're going to be spanked and reversed, or they're going to go along with the law, the way the law is written, the way the law has been stated and interpreted by the United States Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, and the inferior courts like the appellate courts and the district courts. If they don't get the message, they are going to be smacked. So I think we're coming to the end of the road on this issue. And once this happens, the domino effect will be spectacular. And a lot of the laws that we see on the books will also go by the wayside and will be overturned. So maybe at that point, we can finally get the anti-gun left to say, okay, let's sit down and talk about what are the real causes of gun violence. How do we deal with criminals as opposed to the law-abiding citizens and their God-given enumerated constitutional rights? That is now off the table. So now let's have a conversation about how to deal with the criminal element that's willing to commit crimes and atrocities.
I got to tell you, Sam, I think you give them way too much credit. I really do. I know you deal with them on a regular basis, but I think you give them way too much credit. Here's what I'm going to prognosticate. It's just my opinion. I think what's going to happen is nothing prevents the California legislature and Gavin Newsom from creating new laws ad infinitum at every opportunity to try to just peck away at this. And we're going to find ourselves in court constantly trying to slap them down. And so I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. If I'm right about that, and we have a stellar victory here and in the other decisions that Judge Benitez is very, very soon going to release, and he's got a bunch of them, and if this one is any indication of what he's going to do with the others, I think they're all going to be victories for us. If they all end up being final victories, and the state keeps trying to find loopholes to pass new laws constantly, how long do you think it takes to toss those, and how likely is it that laws that go directly against these decisions, once finalized, are going to have negative effects on California gun owners? I'm not sure how that works, but I do know it's a source of frustration on the part of California gun owners, and I hear it all the time that their legislature is going to keep passing them. They're going to keep doing it. They're not going to be affected by this.
I listened to a conversation you had with Chuck and on other podcasts that Chuck's been on, and he said correctly that the legislature's tactic is to try to bankrupt us, forcing us to go to court to overturn their decisions on a regular basis. And if that's the case, we have to stand ready. Our founding fathers gave us a system of government that allows us to object to, through the legal process, to the laws that are sponsored by the legislatures, and we will continue to beat them up. And at some point in time, the voting public is going to say, why do you guys keep spending millions of our taxpayer dollars to fight these lawsuits to encourage the state of California to be sued by the pro-gun community? When we have issues like homelessness, we have issues like, droughts, we have issues like too much water, we have issues like transportation, our roads are in shambles, our gasoline prices are going up, all of these issues. And at some point in time, the voters are going to say enough is enough. We're going to send somebody in there who actually follows the law. And I think that's going to create a new dynamic on the election side, that ultimately people will see that the legislature is being intransigent. They are being bullheaded and are willing to take the financial resources of the state of California and throw them down the toilet. And so that's one thing. And you're right. The anti-gun left in the state legislature is absolutely true believing, hardcore leftists. They are all about control. They are not really about saving people's lives and saving children's lives. Why, if they are, why are they sending convicted gun violence criminals back onto our streets, letting them out of prison early, or not wanting to charge people, or reducing the types of charges that can be filed against criminals who use guns? Why are they doing that? It's because they blame you and me, all of your listeners who are law-abiding citizens in the state of California. They believe that it is our fault that gun crimes are committed, not the fault of the criminals. So it's creating an interesting dynamic for sure. And that's why you can never stop walking that wall. You can never stop fighting for the Second Amendment. You can never stop communicating with those people who have used guns to successfully defend themselves. You can never stop pointing out that, as was recently reported, that over 40% of all mass shootings are stopped by lawful citizens with a gun. The FBI has for years been underreporting that, and now the truth is coming out, and they're kind of going, "Oops, my bad, sorry." And so this is a fight that we have to stay vigilant on. Freedom is expensive.
Yeah, it is, and which brings up, ever so briefly, and then I do have another question about injunctions and possibility of injunctions. Mm-hmm. Brings up the reality that what's really caused us to have this victory is the courts. Because if we didn't have the courts, we don't have the legislature, we don't have the executive branch, we don't have it federally, we don't have it. I mean, in the U.S. Congress, getting gun control through is very difficult. Mm-hmm. But in the state can do whatever it wants to in these crazy states like California because they own everything. They have super majorities, and resistance is futile, as the old Star Trek show used to say. But the federal courts is where we've had victories, and federal judges are appointed by presidents of the United States. And so when people say, well, I'm not going to vote, or I don't vote because it doesn't mean anything, no, I respectfully disagree. This coming election is incredibly important. One of the reasons we've had the victories we've had is because the previous president, the Orange Man, everybody wants to call him, appointed great Supreme Court justices, but he also appointed 300 or 350 or some federal judges around the country who have not completely, but almost universally followed the Constitution in these cases. And that's why we are where we are. In addition to the fact that we have folks like you, obviously, fighting the battle, but you could fight the battle and we could have activist judges and we'd just be right where we always were. Mm-hmm. So we're not. I think elections are incredibly important. And so if you're watching this, please, 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 please vote and think about your constitutional rights before you do. Not so much your pocketbook, although the two go hand in hand right now with the economy the way it is. I guess the question I have now is, obviously, there's an opportunity for the Ninth Circuit to continue the injunction against Benitez's decision if they choose to take the case and review it. I don't know if that always happens or not, but I do know that sometimes judges refuse to have injunctions because they look at the case and they try to figure out who's most likely to win. And if it looks like there's a possibility of a victory on one side, and it's a strong possibility, and that side needs an injunction, they'll do it. Or if it looks like the possibility is that the other side is going to win, but the side that doesn't look like it's going to win wants an injunction, they won't do it. So what's the chance, do you think, that the Ninth takes this as a 3-judge panel review, but refuses to enjoin the law in the meantime and allows Judge Benitez's decision to be enforced?
Well, history has now proven that when courts do exactly that, they defy the Supreme Court and they ignore proper rulings from district court judges, we now have an ability to appeal this very quickly all the way up to the Supreme Court on an emergency basis. And at some point in time, the Supreme Court is going to say enough is enough. Stop this crap. Knock it off. We told you what to do. And if you're not going to do it, we're just going to continue to grant the requests of the plaintiffs, in that case, us. And the Supreme Court can invalidate the actions of the Ninth Circuit if it continues to defy the Supreme Court. Joel, I just got an email that the governor just signed SB 2, the Sensitive Places CCW bill, and AB 28, the 11% excise tax. So today we will be serving Governor Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta with a lawsuit challenging SB 2. I don't believe that law will ever see the light of day. It goes into effect January 1st of next year. And since AB 28 goes into effect July 1st, that gives us a little bit of time to continue to prepare that lawsuit and to marshal our resources to challenge that law as well. So let's clarify that. We know AB 2. We know SB 2 is the retread of SB 19 from last year, and that's the one that makes the whole state a sensitive place. The lawsuit is already in place because Michelle and Associates were ready to file it the first place, and it never
never got anywhere because you and Dan Reed and Rick Travis were up there till 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever and killed it by one vote. And so now being signed today, it would not go into effect until January 2024, but the lawsuit is ready to go. So that's going to drop like right now.
Yeah.
What is the other AB 28? What is that bill? I don't know what that is.
That is the legislature passed an excise tax that would be levied against the purchases of all guns and ammunition. In other words, you go and you buy your gun, you pay your dross, you pay your state sales tax, you pay all of your fees, and then they would add an 11% excise tax on top of that to fund gun violence prevention programs throughout the state. And that excise tax is clearly unconstitutional. It is not allowed for the government to put a precursor on the exercising of a constitutional right. In other words, you cannot exercise this right unless you pay this 11% excise tax. That is clearly unconstitutional, and the state of California knows it. When Rick and myself and Dan and others testified against this bill in the legislature, we told them as much, and they know it. But as you said, they are the never-ending Energizer anti-gun bunnies, and are gonna push it forward no matter what. Hopefully, I guess they think that they will win in the arena of public opinion as opposed to in the courts. I'll take the courts every day.
Well, and I'll tell you something. This is the encouraging part right here. This is the encouraging part. And there's a lot of encouragement in here, but, I hear the discouragement in people because this has been a long fought, decades-long battle. But here's the encouraging part. Every time we get a victory, like we did out of Judge Benitez, every time we get a victory like we did in Heller and McDonald and Caetano, which is an interesting case because I think that's a stun gun case. So that actually goes beyond, that's other defensive tools, knives or whatever, that case also applied because it was a stun gun thing. Mm-hmm. And then you get into Bruin, which sets the test. And now we're going to have these things are going to fall. We're going to get these victories. Every time you get a victory, and it sets a precedent, and the state comes back and passes a law anyway because they go, well, we can do it anyway and we'll pass it anyway, there's a very good chance that it will never see the light of day, like SB 2 will never see the light of day, because a federal court will enjoin it before it becomes law. So it doesn't have to go through this whole long, drawn-out process where we're suffering underneath it. There's no way SB 2 becomes law because the Supreme Court already said to New York, no, you can't make the whole of Manhattan a sensitive place. And New York's theirs has already been tossed in the dustbin over this. California's trying to do the same thing. So I think that's the encouragement I want to leave gun owners with is, yes, the state of California is going to continue to try to do this. They're just going to do it. These anti-gunners are not going to quit. They're going to keep passing these things. They're going to keep getting the governor to sign them. And then folks like Sam here at Gun Owners of California, at California Rifle and Pistol Association, and so on, are going to squash them every time because the federal judges are going to toss them into the trash heap, knowing that there's no chance that they are right out of the gate. The test has already been done. That's unconstitutional. That's already been decided. No, you can't do that. So these things are not going to continually, forever, ad nauseum, drag us through this process constantly. They're going to more and more. We're setting the bar where they just can't do that, and we see that happen in the First Amendment because the First Amendment has so much established decision and jurisprudence to it. It's very hard to violate the First Amendment in this country. I think that's where we're going with the Second Amendment. It's going to be more and more difficult for these folks. They can try. That's fine. Let them try. Let them bat their heads up against the wall. They're not going to be able to do it for very much longer. That's my layman's view. I've just said it, but you work it all the time. Yeah. This is your life. Am I hitting the nail on the head here, or am I completely off?
You, as some of my friends say, you landed the plane safely and efficiently. That is absolutely the case. As a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, we won the case on Junior Sports Magazine issue, a First Amendment case where the state of California said that the gun manufacturers and dealers and wholesalers cannot market firearms-related equipment to youth. That was clearly a violation of the First Amendment, and we won on that on that issue. So yes, the First Amendment has a lot of jurisprudence, and that was actually a lot easier to deal with than the Second Amendment issues. Now, Joel, our side, we have this pent up impatience. People need to remember that in the state of California, it wasn't until 1975 when the first gun ban was proposed in the state legislature. And between 1979 and 1989, because of the work that we had done, Gun Owners of California, Senator H.L. Richardson's leadership, CRPA, NRA, all of the groups that were involved, there were no gun control laws that were passed in the state until 1989 when the Assault Weapons Control Act was passed. And then the Large Capacity Magazine Act was passed, and the ammunition laws, and all of these happened from that time forward. So we have been fighting this fight for a very long time. And now we are winning cases at a record rate. So when you take into account that this all started in 1975, and we are now here winning lawsuit after lawsuit on an expeditious track, people need to be encouraged. And your patience, those of you who have been out there with us since 1975 or later, whenever you joined the Second Amendment train to restore, protect, and defend the Second Amendment, thank you for being patient. We're asking for your patience just a little bit longer as we follow the process that our founding fathers gave us to restore our rights. And we are winning. We are winning across the board. Yes, we won in Antioch in New York against the Hochul and her, CCW Enhancement Protection Act, whatever she did. And we're winning in New Jersey and Michigan and Illinois, in Hawaii and Texas, all across the country. We're winning lawsuits. And here in California, they're going to be huge. They're going to be huge. And we are implementing all of the lessons that we have learned. People say, I always think that once you're ripe, you rot. So once you think you know everything,
once you're ripe, you rot.
Yeah.
I'm never going to forget that.
We are not ripe.
I'm hoping I'm not ripe.
We are still learning, and we are using every opportunity we can to protect millions of lives per year across the country.
Yep.
People who use firearms of all types to protect themselves in their homes and their travels and their businesses and things like that. So I want to encourage people, hang in there with us. We're winning. Yes, the courts, they seem to move at a snail's pace, but in comparison, they are moving expeditiously because of the leadership from the United States Supreme Court and from judges like Judge Benitez to move these things through the court system much quicker. And we also learned that there are opportunities and procedures that we can use to bypass some of these courts and ultimately go straight to the Supreme Court with emergency requests to overturn these efforts to squelch the Second Amendment rights of lawful citizens. So, Joel,
hang in there.
Like
okay, so here's a little tidbit for you. Mm-hmm. I've quoted this many times because one of my favorite books is The Art of War, because it just many things that Sun Tzu wrote in there really are awesome. But one of my favorite ones when it comes to strategy is that tactics without strategy. He used to say strategy without tactics is the longest path to victory, but tactics without strategy is just the noise before defeat. So there's a lot of urge to file a lawsuit against this and file a lawsuit against that and file a lawsuit against this. But the problem is that's tactical, but it's not strategic. And so we're just making a lot of noise, but we're going to get creamed. So you mentioned this AB 28, which is an excise tax on firearms. It's unconstitutional because you cannot put a precursor fee, you cannot charge somebody to exercise a constitutional right. And what I want to voice here for you if you're watching this is that winning that battle is a step in the direction of winning the battle of doing away with the whole idea of having to pay to get a concealed carry permit, or having to go take a class that's required, because those things are, again, precursors to exercising the constitutional right to bear arms, and they are unconstitutional. However, going at them directly is not necessarily the best strategy all the time. But if you can start to build a body of case law that indicates, no, okay, look what the court's decided here, and here. And oh, by the way, we're going to go after this now too, then you start to see that go away. So there is a strategy to this, and it's being applied excellently. The problem is it takes time. So if you're like Sam and I, we came onto the earth in the 50s, okay? Then we've seen it happen over time. If you were born in 1990 and you're 30-something years old, or you were born in the late 80s or something, you're in your 30s or you're starting to get into your early 40s, guess what? It's always been a violation of your rights your entire life if you've been in California, and we get that. So what Sam's trying to express to you is he's been around longer than you, and he's seen the progression from not having our rights restricted in California to having them overly restricted, and now starting to win our rights back again. And so sometimes it takes somebody that's, I hate to say it, but it takes somebody that's an antique like Sam. Of course, I'm not, you understand, to step back and give us a little bit of a perspective as what the whole fight has been over time. So I'm grateful that you did that, Sam. And I think staying positive and recognizing that every win is another brick in the wall. It's another brick in the wall that we're building that's going to protect our rights from ever having had this done to them again. And it just takes time to install those bricks. I started out in life as a masonry guy, brick and block guy. So I can tell you it takes time to build a wall, but if you build it right, it's very, very strong. That's what we're doing. So hang in there, hang in the fight, stay encouraged if you can. I know it's tough, but hang in there, because this is not the end of the Judge Benitez show. Just so that you know, it's just the beginning.
It sure is, Joel.
Okay.
It sure is, Joel. And you know, my request to those people that are listening is that you pray for us. Yeah. Those of us that are involved in the fight, either in the courts, our lawyers, our legal team. You know, I lovingly can refer to them to our legal beagles. And I joke about wanting to keep them in their offices with the doors locked and having DoorDash pizza and beer delivered to them so that they won't have to leave to go out and get a meal to sustain the work that they are doing. They're doing the Lord's work. They're doing a massive amount of work. If people understood how quickly they have to respond to lawsuits, not only filing them, but supporting them, and the deadlines that they have to write incredibly important friend of the court briefs, people would say, wow, how do they do that? They have a couple of days to do this, and they come up with these amazing arguments. They remember, they have studied history. Remember, it is unconstitutional to charge a poll tax. That is putting a precursor requirement on the exercising of a constitutional right to vote. It's the same thing with excise taxes. You can't do that. At that point, it becomes permission from the government to exercise a right or a privilege, as opposed to exercising a privilege. And I think, Joel, that we are moving to a point sometime in the future, Lord willing, in our lifetime, but if not for our kids and grandkids, when we will not need a permission from the government for us to avail ourselves of whatever we need to protect our lives. And the Second Amendment will be one of the gold pillars of the American Constitution. You and I already know it is, but it will be acknowledged by the states, whether they like it or not, in a very big way. So I'm super encouraged. I feel young and giddy. And
you look young and giddy. How do you do that?
Well, you know, I just being busy and staying engaged in this fight and seeing the victories as they're coming. It's like adding years to our lifetime. Joel, what you do is so incredibly important to spread the word to people, not only to give them news and information as to what's happening to their rights, but to encourage them and to invite them to be patient and to support those people that are fighting to restore and then protect and defend their God-given, pre-existing constitutional rights to keep and bear arms, and that they shall not be infringed. So
Okay, well, with that in mind, I'm going to say this because I get this question everywhere I go. People I've never met in my life will come ask me this, and I'll be at the Albertsons or something. Can I get a CCW in California? Yes. Okay. So just got asked that question yesterday. And well, I thought it was really hard. No, it's not. It takes time. So, for example, oddly enough, yes, there are still some counties and sheriffs and so on that are being stinkers. And trust me, Sam's organization as well as CRPA are going after them, and they will comply or they'll be forced to comply. That's the way it goes. They're going to comply with the Supreme Court's decision. California is a shall issue state because all states at a minimum are shall issue states after Bruin. Okay. Now, we'd love it to be a constitutional carry state, but you got to get there. And that's what I was talking about before with the whole strategy thing. But as it stands right now, your local sheriff, or if you happen to be in a county where some of the city police chiefs they issue permits. I'm in San Diego County. I can tell you the San Diego County Sheriff's Department has issued a ton of permits. They're trying to streamline the process and make it easier and so on. It is a long process to get the permit, and that's not because they're trying to make it difficult. It's because they've now issued, I think, 14 or 15,000 of them. So you got all the renewals happening all the time. Plus, they've got a lot of people applying. So be prepared for that first issuing to take time, but it's relatively simple. It's extremely simple compared to what it used to be. And here's what's required. You got to be a resident of the county. You got to be 21 years of age or older, and you can't be a prohibited person. And you got to pay the bill. You got to pass the background check. That's it. There's no good cause reason. You don't have to tell them why. That does not exist anymore in California, just so that you know. Now, I think some counties are requiring you to do some sort of a personality test or something, which is absurd. But San Diego does not. So if you're in San Diego County, Orange County, many of the counties, I urge you, go and apply, get your concealed carry permit so that you can exercise your right to carry and defend yourself in public. So there you go. I wanted to answer that question. Any comments about that before we go? We've run really long here, which I don't care, but that's...
If you were to paint a map of the state of California as to where it is easy to or simple to get a concealed weapons permit, the vast majority of the state would be colored with the color that says, yeah, just apply and you'll get one. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you'll get one. And in those places that are still making it difficult, they want you to submit your social media posts and all of that stuff. Those are all subjective things. The Supreme Court has already clearly said and told them that, yeah, some CCW programs can exist, but they have to be objective. They cannot have any amount of subjectivity. In other words, some police official or bureaucrat looking at social media and saying, oh, this person shouldn't have one because, in my opinion, that's subjectivity. That is unconstitutional. So yes, if you are law-abiding, go out and apply for a CCW. And working with CRPA and Chuck Michelle, we have put the sheriffs that are being intransigent, we're putting them on notice that a lawsuit is coming. And Joel, when you talked about tactics and strategies, some people say, why are you suing on this issue in this case, in this state, and all of that stuff? That is strategy. Just like the Bruin case in New York. That case having to do with the CCW system in the state of New York had implications that spread from sea to shining sea. So it was incredibly important for us to participate in that lawsuit in order to affect what happens here in California. So the tactic was to file the lawsuit, but the strategy was to pick the lawsuits that are going to have far-ranging implications to restore the Second Amendment. And that's what we are doing. We're going to file lawsuits on everything that comes out of the state legislature in California. There's no question about it. But if we get rulings from other cases that we're involved in that basically puts us in the driver's seat on those lawsuits, the results are going to be predetermined and we're going to win. So,
Well, this gets back to my wall building analogy. When you're building a wall, if you've never built one, I built a lot of walls because that's what I used to do for a living. I left high school, went right into the masonry trade. So when you're doing that, then you've got to lay the foundation properly. It's got to be straight. It's got to be plumb. When you're building a wall that has a corner on it, that cornerstone is absolutely vital. You've got to lay that That's got to be plumb. It's got to be squared up, and it's got to be plumb. Once you've got that, all those stones have to be level. All of them have to be straight. And so you have to start with the foundation, and then you lay the first set of stones on the top, and then you lay the next one, and you lay the next one, whether it's brick or block or what it is. If you don't get the foundation straight, if you don't get that cornerstone right, if you don't make sure that every stone you put there is exactly placed the way it's supposed to be, that wall is not going to be strong. It is not going to be square. It's going to be half a bubble off a plumb at a minimum, and it's going to fall down. It's not going to last. So the way that this is being built is specifically that way. Over the years, the foundation has been laid. The Supreme Court has laid the foundation one case at a time, and I think, Sam, you did a brilliant job of explaining that at the beginning of the interview. And now that foundation is laid, now the capstones aren't there yet. We can't put the capstones on yet. We'd like to, but we're getting, that wall's getting pretty tall, and that wall's looking pretty strong, and it's looking like it won't be very long before we're putting capstones on it and we're done. And I think that's what you're seeing in the reaction and the response of these anti-gunners. When they're, like I said, when they're reaching back and trying to find Bowie knife laws, club laws, because they can't find any analogous law back then. And remember, the court put the burden on them, on the state, not on us. The burden's not on us to prove it anymore. If the plain text of the amendment covers the conduct in question, it's presumptively constitutional. That's what the Supreme Court said. And then it's up to the government to prove that whatever regulation they're trying to come up with would have been tolerated by the founders back when the founders were still around. And if it wouldn't be tolerated by them then, it will not be tolerated now. That's the way it works. So the burden is on them now. Now we're putting that last few rows of stone on that wall, and pretty soon we're going to be putting capstones on it, and then we're done. And then we'll have to go back and knock them off the top of the wall. They're going to come along with their little chisel and try to take the wall apart, and we're going to smack them on the hand and tell them like little brats, go put daddy's tools away. You can't do this anymore. I want you to hang in there, okay? Hang in there. And particularly if you're in California and you're in a jurisdiction where the sheriff's department is not issuing or they're making it really hard, relief is coming. Believe me, relief is coming. Hang in there, okay? I know it's tough, but we're so close. We're so close. Now's not the time to get frustrated. Now's not the time to give up. Hang in there. Yep. Support SAM. Support CRPA. Support Gun Owners of America, please. Support whatever favorite organization you got going on. Support them. Okay, they need all the help that they can get. Any last words, Sam? We've gone really long, but I honestly don't care. It's been a great interview, and I'm grateful to get this information out. So.
I got goosebumps on my arms because I'm looking at my picture on the screen, and my name's Samuel Paredes. Paredes means walls in Spanish.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm proud to be a wall builder, and I look to my side and I see these pallets of capstones that are just glistening in the sun, ready to be put on top.
Ready to go.
Just need to finish the process. We need to take it to the end and then put those capstones on top. So Joel, thank you. We are winning. We are going to win everything. So stick with us. You want information about Gun Owners of California, gunownersca.com, Google Gun Owners of California, our website will come up, and understand that all of the resources that we get right now, we've already finished spending the money on lobbying the legislature. We're spending it all on supporting the lawsuits that are restoring our rights. And we're already into the elections next year, so we will be spending some of our efforts to defeat these legislators who continue to defy the Supreme Court and the rulings of the federal courts and ignoring the Constitution of the United States. People like Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta and Reggie Jones Sawyer and these folks, we're going to be very happy to defeat them in a resounding way, but we can't do it without you. So your support of watching and being armed and informed, like we say here in GOC, by watching GunGuyTV and having the latest information, hearing from the people who are in the trenches, are incredibly important. And Joel, we used to say, our people don't show up to the legislature to lobby and to testify and all those things. We are now at a point to where you can sit on the comfort of your couch watching TV and be incredibly involved in the fight by picking up your phone, picking up your computer, and supporting Gun Owners of California, CRPA, FPC, NRA, any of the organizations that are fighting to defend your rights, by giving us the financial resources, by blessing us with the financial resources to carry the fight. You will be incredibly involved, and we invite you to be our partners in this effort. So God bless you.
Sam, thank you very much for coming on the show, brother. I love you a ton, man. Have a great week, and we'll talk as soon as something new happens, okay?
100%, Joel.
Thank you very much for listening to the entire interview. I'm very, very grateful. Have a wonderful week. Please stay encouraged and stay active and stay in the fight. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.